Shalom.
Shalom.
How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great.
We're doing great.
Okay, so I'll introduce you guys. Sitting next to me, or COVID sitting next to me, is Avi Lusik and your wife, Ariella Bernstein.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, and you guys made Aliyah from? It's a tricky
New York.
question. 'Cause
New York.
Different places, right?
Yeah.
New York, we were living in Lawrence in 2009 when the family came, but it was Ariella and the children who made Aliyah, and I just flew along with Nefesh B'Nefesh. It was a split Aliyah. I first made Aliyah in 2015 after continuing to work in the U.S. for 5.5 years in New York and Washington.
Right, so that's actually not like a typical Aliyah. You guys,
Right.
So I'll just, start off by saying we're here to talk about your book. It is sitting over here. Aliyah, Home, Hope, Reality, which is a beautiful cover. And you mentioned when we spoke before, there's no Israeli flags. There's no one kissing the ground, right? It's like very subtle. So we're going to talk about the book, and it's relevant for people who are viewing us who are maybe considering Aliyah, or maybe even made Aliyah and didn't think about certain things that were going on. So maybe before we get to the book, you'll tell us a little bit about yourselves, what your professions are, and we'll move on from there.
Okay.
So you want to start?
I have a background in finance. I worked for Standard & Poor's, the bond rating agency, for 24 years as a manager, as an analyst. After that,
So you're good with numbers.
I hope.
He did all the statistics
And he did
in
all
the
the
book
statistics in the
because
book,
of that.
so right.
And after I left Standard & Poor's, I joined the Securities and Exchange Commission, the financial regulatory agency in the U.S. who has oversight for the rating agencies. And I led the exam program with oversight for the rating agencies. Continued to do that for over 5 years, and that's what brought me to Washington and back to New York. And
Today in Israel?
Today I've been serving as a consultant to one of the regulatory agencies here in Israel, and also to rating agencies back in the U.S.
My background is in labor law. I spent 20 years in the federal sector in the States. When I came here, as almost every OLED does, you have to reinvent yourself. I was not going to even think about passing the bar here. Labor law here is completely different, a completely different world. The state of Israel inherited the British mandate.
Without even speaking about the language.
That's without the language. That's
that you
without the
speak
language.
very well, I must say.
Yeah, thank you. I worked here mostly, as I think it's very common amongst English-speaking Olim, particularly those who write fairly well. I ended up in the non-for-profit sector for nearly 10 years. I now work in investor relations here in Israel, and for one of the larger VCs in Jerusalem at JVP. And I think that everybody needs to know you have to, in some way, reinvent yourself. I mean, this book didn't come necessarily out of reinventing. It came out of our experiences with some young Olim who'd we adopted over the course of the years.
Right, so maybe we could talk about these Olim you adopted, and that will connect us to the book. So there is about, like 6 of those?
Yeah, we dedicated the book to 6 of them who had lived in our house at various periods. Some for, almost nobody for less than 3 to 6 months. Some of them stay for a year, some of them stay for a year.
Especially Chayalim
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Especially Chayalim Bodedim that were with us.
Yeah. And
Also, it wasn't just Chayalim Bodedim, it was also...
Yeah, as university students, there are younger Olim who came after university, people who come often for Chagim. We've been through 2 lockdowns during Chagim, and in both times we sort of send WhatsApps to everybody. Okay, listen, grab a mattress on the floor if you need it, because you're going to be stuck. Wherever you'll be for a while, and if you want to be here, we're happy to have you. And so these are relationships that we've had for a very long time now.
So we've had people living with us. We've had people visiting with us. People who might be here for a post-high school year. And others who are coming to have a year of learning after college, mid-career, at various places.
I want to ask each one of you separately to give the elevator pitch of this book. And I know it's going to be very different because I did my homework, right? So,
Right.
We had dinner together last night.
Yeah.
Virtually.
Virtually.
Okay.
Virtually.
So, Avi, you want to start?
So this is a book that is essentially our collected wisdom of what we have gained as Olim here, hosting all these young Olim, talking with them and talking with their parents, being conduits of trying to provide guidance for the life decisions that the young Olim are about to go through. The chapters of this book include just about everything that a young Olah and their family could be considering. The issues
By the way,
that
it's not just young. It's any Olim,
That is
right?
Young
true.
compared, I think, to us.
Oh, okay, okay,
I think that's
okay.
how you look at it. It's 18
Okay.
to, let's say, 35. Okay, I would
Okay.
say that would be.
That's
and
still young.
speaking,
Okay.
you're right. When we started this book, we thought we were writing for young Olim, but we kept on expanding it and expanding it on issues for families that come with children and have grandparents to deal with, not just Olim and their parents. There are. It's really the collective wisdom of what we have done over the years. There's a lot of practical information, a lot of emotional information.
Right, but she's the emotional.
That- I'm the
But
emotional
wait,
one, right.
wait. But before we
So-
get to that, but what you didn't mention is the statistics, the surveys
Okay,
you
thanks.
did, which is like, seems to be like what's like, you know, the I don't know, the
Foundation.
foundation.
Yeah,
of the
I heard you were about to
So
say
along-
Bastis.
Basis, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
basis. I was gonna say
Yeah.
right. Okay.
So along the way, we did a survey of Olim and their parents. We collected results from approximately 300 respondents, and it tested many of our theories. We were open to go with where it went, and many of the questions were open-ended and allowed for multiple answers. When issues come up, why do you come to Israel? What are the concerns that parents might have? How do you feel when your children leave this country? All give multiple answers, and it gave us a rich set of data to base our conclusions on as we move through this book.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a long elevator
Yes.
pitch, but we're gonna move on to
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, my elevator pitch for it is that this book addresses the stresses and strains, the emotional stresses and strains of Aliyah on families we leave behind, as much as Olim who are here. And Avi is correct about the data. That the data we sliced based upon parent responses and Olim responses, and we were looking for where there were differences, and there were, and some of it we suspected.
Where are the bigger differences?
Who I think one of the bigger differences is when it comes to communication between families here and people who made Aliyah and their families back home. Obviously, because of advanced technology, parents speak to their kids here at least once a week, and the data shows that across the board. Both parents say that, and Olim say that. Except if you ask both sides what they communicate about, what we would consider as parents ourselves important, like I'm having a problem with my contract, my rental, I have to move, I have a problem with my job, I don't know what I'm signing, okay? None of those things happen. The kids admit, the young Olim admit, I'm not talking to my parents about that. And parents say, well, we think they're talking to us about it. So there's a huge divide between what young people.
Because they're expecting their parents just to not have any
knowledge.
They
They
help
just
them.
yeah.
It's just like a waste of. Right.
Yeah, they figure the cultural gap is so huge at that point. Whether it's a month after they make Aliyah or 6 months after they make Aliyah, the gap is so enormous that their parents are not really able to help them. Whether it's for linguistic reasons or cultural reasons.
So I mentioned the day of Aliyah. So I mean, so you have like the statistics here in the book showing that 67% of the parents joined day of Aliyah, and many of them didn't, right? For different reasons.
Yeah, some of them. It's fair that some of them can't join or be with their kid until the last minute they go through the departure gate because they live far away and there's a connecting flight, and the flight that they're catching to Israel is not leaving from their home city. But yeah, there's a fair enough number of parents and Olim who don't spend their last few minutes together at the airport.
And you also mentioned that there's I don't know if the cultural difference. There's a difference between the way the Olim experienced it and their parents.
Yeah.
And your
Yeah.
parents did not come.
Yes, in complete honesty, we say it in the book. We cleared it with our parents or my parents before we wrote it. But yeah, my father could not he dropped us off at the curb. He couldn't come into the airport. We lived not far away from JFK, 10 minutes.
Right.
My mother came into the airport and couldn't stay for the Nefesh B'Nefesh ceremony. She was
Which is,
gone
which
before.
is a really nice and emotional.
Which is a really
Yes.
big deal.
I've done it as an Israeli citizen a few times.
Yeah,
but
it's
not as
really a big deal. And Rabbi Fass
Kinda
actually,
like you.
Yeah, Rabbi Fass says this, and we actually quoted him in the book. He says this, that Olim have many, many welcoming points when they come to Israel. The taxi driver will welcome them, the teacher for their kids, the neighbor, the makolet down the block. But nobody goes to hug your parents when they go home by themselves. There's nobody there for them on the other side, other than a lot of people saying how wonderful it is, and it might not quite be how parents felt. And that's exactly what the survey shows. We found many, many parents, large percentages, Avi, we'll talk about the percentages in a minute, but large percentages of parents who might have been proud, but also quite a bit sad. And there were, interestingly, quite a large percentage of responses of Olim who reflecting upon it afterwards, said, you know what, I was very happy and excited for myself, but I didn't realize until I was already at the airport how much pain this was causing my parents.
Or maybe even just years later.
Oh, yeah, it could have been years later. We didn't ask precisely when, but yeah.
Yeah.
The leading expressed emotion is the sadness by the parents. And in almost all cases, there's multiple feelings expressed. That they have pride in their children, even when they're showing the sadness, even when they're crying. They do feel in appreciation. Many of these parents were injecting their children with Zionism.
Yep.
They might not have been showing the Zionism at that moment because it's like, whoa, it's my own child who's
Right.
going.
Yeah.
But they're feeling that pride. They might even feel a little happiness for their children. And it's also reversed for the Olim. The Olim have that excitement, but they look over and they see the face of their parents. And many of them feel sad, not for themselves, but what it's causing to their parents.
That was one of the survey questions where we gave an opportunity for people to write free text. And some of them were so moving that we picked like 10 of them, both from the parent side and from the Olim side, and put them in the book.
Can you give like examples?
Yeah, I think one of them, Avi will open up the book, but one of them, I remember from a mother's side, she said it was like having open heart surgery without anesthesia.
Wow.
So that's a tough one. And one of them actually said,
Yeah.
I have to put on my reading glasses, but one of them said, I didn't realize until after I had, it was an emotional day for my parents, but I was more excited for the future than anything else. I was excited and nervous. My parents put up a strong front, but I found out that they cried as soon as I got through security at the airport. Okay. I remember I cried, and I never cried leaving my parents ever. I was very glad that they saw me off. Another one says, my mom wore sunglasses. She was bawling. You know, it's one of those things that they're completely not prepared. I myself wasn't prepared, I don't think, for what that moment was going to feel like. No matter how many months or years of preparation you have, it's
Number
very
one, this
emotional
is
day.
consistent with what you see on the Nefesh B'Nefesh videos, the sections that are videoed at Kennedy Airport or
Right.
at Newark Airport. You can see when the parents are giving their final brachot to
Yeah,
the
I see
children.
that. I can't like not. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
You
By the way,
feel it.
apropos of brachot and what happens on Friday, for years, Avi would call as often as he possibly could on a Friday and give brachot to the children on
Wow.
a Friday.
By phone.
By phone.
phone.
I can't tell you, quite frankly, how much the children remember that. That'd be worth asking them. They know it happened. I don't know how emotional they feel about it, or even if they understood how much of a dedication and commitment it was for Avi to say, I'm in a meeting, I'm walking out, it's a certain hour, I
Yeah.
need to do this for 3 minutes. Walk out, speak to both kids, and that was it. And he might not even speak to me before Shabbat, but he would speak to the children before Shabbat to give them a bracha. And those are the long-standing memories I have from those years that Avi wasn't around.
Even the feeling of parents. I have from 2006, my family went for a one-year experience. It wasn't even a pilot year.
Right.
In retrospect, it seems like one. But they left, it was during the Lebanon War in
Oh, wow.
August
They came
of
here.
'06.
Okay.
It was scheduled to come. They
Right.
came. I took them to Kennedy Airport. And leaving Kennedy Airport, knowing I'm not going to be there to visit them for a month, it was an incredibly
This is
empty
before the year
feeling.
before the Aliyah flight.
Yeah, it was actually
Yeah.
2 years, yeah.
Yeah, it was an incredibly empty feeling, being even though you feel great, this is what you've set up, you've organized it with your family, but then I'm going back to other stuff in New York, and they're off to Israel, and it's that empty feeling. I can relate to what the parents are feeling.
What statistic most surprised you, or a set of statistics on a certain topic that was like you would expect to be differently, and it was?
I think.
Okay, it is. It has to do with lone soldiers.
Yeah.
When I learned how many soldiers after their service felt that in retrospect they were unprepared. It is something close to 50%. Now we're not talking about people
50% of what? Of saying they were not.
They were not prepared. 50%
that they
of
weren't
Olim say they
prepared.
weren't
And
prepared.
these are not people who didn't complete their service. They went in, presumably with a lot of enthusiasm, because this isn't a requirement for them. They chose to do it. They came here. They served, but then they came out afterwards and said, there was something that was bothering me. I was personally disturbed by seeing that high number.
Had I known how the data would come out, I probably would have asked a subsequent question. But in relation to that on lone soldiers, we asked, did you feel differently about your service afterwards? It was a Likert scale of 1 to 5, and very large percentages said they felt differently about their service. We did not, because I didn't almost expect that level of an answer. I didn't ask, did you feel more negative or did you feel more positive? I'm just going to hazard a guess that I think it was more negative.
Really?
Based upon my experience. Not because the Army's bad, and just because it's plain difficult.
It's very difficult.
It's just very difficult,
It's
and they were
just
not prepared.
It's not just
They were not
moving to a different
Right.
country. It's being in the most tough.
Yeah.
And
We've had our own daughter served for nearly 5 years in the Air Force.
Wow.
And so it was, and while it was unquestionably a different kind of service than somebody who's in combat, it's still, we know that it has an impact, and we know that not having a family that you rely on is very, very
the
difficult.
cultural differences are probably more extreme there.
They are. They are.
We have seen with some of the lone soldiers exhibitions of shvuz.
Yeah. Very difficult.
Shavuz.
Yeah,
Shavuz.
yeah.
That's how you say it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you could.
It's difficult.
It just.
And
the
shavuz
weariness.
means, where we didn't explain that. Shavuz
Yeah.
means being like depressed.
Yeah, or
down.
just feeling broken by
Worn
the system.
out, yeah.
Broken by the system, and you'd be surprised when it comes to them. It doesn't necessarily come to them a year and a half in. It can come 5 months in, and then what do you do?
Now, thankfully, it's not all.
Right.
Yeah.
And our daughter is a
It's funny because
wonderful
I would
example.
expect like it to be more like the families, but in a way, I guess a family has to do a lot more preparation in order to make that move. And someone who's young and
They just,
single,
it's just
they
easier for
like
them. They just up and go.
hop on, yeah.
And their parents on the other side, the parents that they leave behind, ought to try to understand what these kids are going through. We talk about it a lot in the IDF chapter about how you need to readjust. If the system looks like it's massively disorganized to you, it is. Like, we did not prepare that to say it at the same time. It is massively disorganized. When your child who desperately wanted to come here and serve calls and starts to complain, and that's going to happen, it's not going to be helpful to tell your kid, I didn't want this, you did.
Yeah.
That's really not the time to be saying it to them. It's not helpful. And
But
those are things that happen.
Do you have any data of what the parents are saying or feeling?
Yeah, we have. We actually asked a question during the IDF or national service, because our data went both for those who served in the IDF and who did Shirut Leumi.
Okay.
Okay.
Which is different.
It's a completely different thing. We talk
Right.
about it a lot in the book. And did they receive? Is their perception of the care appropriate? Was the care appropriate? It's really astounding. Of parents, 68% of parents say they agree, and only 53% of Olim say that they agree. So there is a very large percentage difference of the way parents perceive the care and the way the Shirut Leumi or IDF.
And do you have it
person-
split between the Army and Shirut Leumi, or it's just like
I did
both?
not. No, because there were less, and I'll tell you why. Because it's probably statistically irrelevant for Shirut Leumi. There are only about 100 Shirut Leumi people who
Right,
come
there's not a lot, okay.
There's not a lot. You're talking about way more than that. There are over 3,000 of them, 3,500, depending upon who you ask.
Okay, so we have one of the statistics you had discuss the reasons for people making Aliyah.
Yeah. That's the question in our house that I let Avi ask, because.
What, like at a Shabbat table?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I let. By the way, we've had something near probably over 100 people that have come through our house on Friday nights. It ranges from all different kinds, Jews and non-Jews. Really, there's a tremendous number of people who come, but young people who come in particular, Avi is the one who asked this question, largely because if there's something that seems to me off, I'll hit it within 10 seconds, and I'm probably not the right person to be in the room at the time, so I go do the dishes. Okay. But Avi asks the question and really tries to dig deep to try to understand why. You can talk a little bit about that.
It's always very interesting to hear what is truly motivating them. And in most cases, people have thought about it very deeply. In some cases, not a lot. Like, it's probably a little bit more fun to know that some people have come and respond to us, "Oh, it's awesome," and we at that point we know it's a very thin set of thinking. Or someone else who might be trying to indicate that they're doing it to disturb their parents, like. Please.
So you have here, I don't know, it says 87. It's awesome.
Not percentage, it's by
right.
numbers.
So it's 87 of the respondents.
Yeah.
Okay.
But many of
what would that be in
but very
percentage?
few of them said that singularly. In
that's
fact,
the
I'm
reason
not
why
sure
we didn't do
anyone
it.
said it
That's the
singularly.
reason. That's right. That's why we didn't do that. The statistics for that were not done by percentage because you were able to tick off more than
like
one option.
Open, okay.
Yeah, it was. You could tick off more than one option, and in this case, almost nobody said it's amazing alone.
We are happy to,
and I'm happy to hear
see
that. Yeah.
that nobody said it that way. That you have. Issues like very strong feelings about the destiny of Jews being in Israel.
Which that's the highest?
That's the highest. The most often repeated,
Is this 200 out of...
Well, out of total 300 respondents, you're talking about a tremendous number of people who've said that that's what moved them.
It's probably 250 or so that actually gave responses. Not everyone responds to every question.
So the next one under that was 167 is Jews belong in Israel.
Yeah.
My recollection is like an average of 3 responses
to that question
per respondent. So they're giving multiple responses.
Right, so I'll just say afterwards it's inspiration to live in a land where everyone shares the same culture. Then very close to that we have to defend the country, which is that's a substantial amount of people.
Yes, it is.
So I assume these were the younger ones.
Yeah,
But
these are the younger ones. These are the ones, and we were able to isolate who. Of that group, which ones we're serving and which ones.
And we have an inspiring gap year, which is very important, for organizations like Masa.
Right.
A very large percentage of people who are on Masa make Aliyah. So I mean, this is definitely.
That's something that comes up often, and we've heard it often. I'm always interested in knowing that they've dug deeper than just their Masa experience.
I would assume that those were the people that ticked off a few, right? It wouldn't just be a year.
It can't be just that because if it is just that.
Right.
It's not a reality. Anybody who's here for a Masa experience or any other post-gap year, it's not the reality.
Right. So then we have it's awesome, 87, and then there's others. Which
they just checked off other. They just checked.
Well, we did find a couple of extra things that some people said that they were trying to escape anti-Semitism wherever they lived.
Okay.
By the way, that's significant. That's significant.
That is.
Or they wanted to find a Jewish spouse. But one of
and by the way, there's the question I actually even wanted to ask you last night, and I forgot, was these Olim are from all over?
These Olim are only English-speaking Olim, which then automatically narrows your world. Okay?
Right.
So two-thirds.
But it's many countries.
Yes, it was almost all. It was North America.
So
it was obviously the United States,
Canada,
Australia, England, Australia, South Africa.
South Africa.
We even had a few I think that were from Argentina, who answered the survey in English. It was
but mainly English-speaking only.
Mainly, which is automatically going to reduce the numbers. Sergio,
2/3 of the Olim are coming from the former Soviet Union, Ukraine, Russia.
Yeah, Professor Sergio De Pergola talks about it. 2/3 of them are, and that's the reason why that question. He talks about how 2/3 of the Olim that come from the Ukraine or the former Soviet Union come because they are normally escaping a much more difficult Jewish identity in life, okay?
Right.
And they also are coming, many of them are coming for greater opportunity, economic opportunity in Israel, and that's not the case amongst the North American Olim.
Right, so this is interesting. Yeah. So I write for our newspaper, for Makor Rishon, and I write about Jewish communities around the world, but also about Aliyah, and the average Israeli, when you ask, why are people making Aliyah from France, or like you're saying, former Soviet Union, stuff like that, anti-Semitism. So it's very complex. Like, also, no one will just make Aliyah because of there was a terrorist attack.
That's right.
It's complex. Everything,
That's right.
and definitely when you're like moving to a different country, unless you're 18, right, which is maybe. But there's also the issue of the financial situation, and we're not seeing any of that over here, which is
Not in these numbers. Not in these numbers.
very interesting. And
Yep.
also, you have the issue. There's always talks about Jewish education in North America being very high, and
Didn't come up here.
Didn't come up. You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting. It's a very ideological group of people who are.
I'm happy about that.
Right.
Because if you're coming here because this is very good friends of ours, we came right during during the global recession, the financial crisis. And I had friends of ours who called us up and said, well, the cost of Jewish education in America and healthcare, maybe it's just worth it for me to come to Israel. And I said, if that's why you're coming, don't come.
So we spoke about the concerns, and and there are many concerns that people have immigrating and definitely making Aliyah. So the highest one over here I see is to be too far away from family.
Yeah.
129 people who.
I get that.
Yeah,
I get that. I think we both get that. It's really hard. It's really difficult.
I would
think
expect
that
other things to be higher.
Yeah, did you? Okay, so I think one of the ones, where does economics?
Well, you
Yeah,
can't
because
make a
like
living.
Can't
making
make a living,
living, that's
yeah.
a big deal.
I think if you to consider the fact that most of the people that answered the survey are Olim, and they're probably younger, they perhaps are not looking at the economic implications in the same way as
so
somebody
what
like
is
you.
the age of the people you spoke to, or
I would guess that
Percentage-wise.
we.
Let me check.
I don't know if we.
I don't think we
asked
didn't ask the age. We didn't
But
ask the age.
the impression that we got was that it was mid-20s and earlier were most of the Olim.
oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
And
Because
but even the Olim, even if they didn't feel the distance, they felt that their parents felt the distance.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is a driving issue. It came through at a
right,
couple
but
of
the
points.
can't make a living is somewhere close to the middle of like
Yeah,
the amount of.
it's
so
it's reflective of
that's
the age of the person who answered the survey. No, unquestionably. I'd have
Because
to.
I know from people who make Aliyah and leave.
Right.
One of the highest reasons
Yeah.
would be
That's the reason.
because they're not.
Oh, we have
We
that
have a
make a
whole.
living.
Yeah.
We have a chapter. It's we call it if all else fails. It's really about people who've made Aliyah and then left. It's a concept that occurs for native Israelis too, but we're focusing on those that made Aliyah. And
But it's a difference, by the way.
Oh, sure.
Yes, it is.
Because an Israeli doesn't necessarily, whatever.
Right, the
Feel
Israeli.
the, I
But they
failed.
also
I
don't
failed.
have. But they also don't have the. They speak the language. Okay. They feel part of a community. Call it what you will.
Right.
It doesn't matter where it is on the spectrum of community. But they
Right.
feel part of the global Israeli community for whatever it's worth.
Right.
And they still can't make it. The data shows that from 2018, which I think was the last year the data was published, something like 55% of those who left Israel were Israeli-born. Mm-hmm. Right here.
Right.
Okay. They left probably for economic reasons.
Right.
Okay. They don't. Those questions are not asked by the CBS, the Central Bureau for Statistics. They don't
Right.
ask that question. They don't ask why. They also don't ask you where you're going. You just.
It's also
leave
kind of
behind.
difficult because it's
Yeah.
like, how do you determine this is a person that decided to leave?
That's right. There probably are more
It's
than one factor.
complicated.
And also, people
Right.
also might go for relocation for 2 years in high tech and come back. That's
Right,
also
exactly.
possible.
So
I
there's
should just
a certain
say.
amount of years from
Yeah.
when they decide,
That's
And
right.
again, it's like you came to visit, so whatever. It's a whole.
By the way, you
the
asked.
statistics that we collected were not on the people who left, but of Olim who know people who left within 5 years. And 5 years seems to be a magic point that
Right.
if
Yeah.
a person makes Aliyah and makes it here for 5 years, it drops the chances of doing Yeridah afterwards drops off dramatically.
That's the
But that
5-year
first
point.
5 years,
Yeah.
Right.
there are still
But,
issues.
I mean, according to the answers over here, it seems like, as you mentioned with the Chayalim,
Yeah.
these young people have no idea what's expected for them because it's expensive. It's not and Israel is expensive, and
Yeah.
certainly not in school, but other things. Army service, very low. Like it's not a huge concern. It's dangerous. It's actually interesting because if you, 10, 20 years ago, it would be different.
Yeah, yeah. I think it just doesn't seem to be the reason why people are leaving. More people are leaving because they don't feel a sense of community. Many have a problem with, let's call it, the aggressive nature of Israeli society. They just can't seem to adjust to that. That is unquestionably a difficult thing for North Americans. And then obviously after that come a whole bunch of issues. If you have a place that you, whether it's the community that you live in or whether it's people at work, and you have some sort of net, some sort of system that can hold you at the moments that you're having the greatest difficulty, that might hold you here. But if that net is not here, okay, and that net is somewhere else, it's very easy to pull up stakes and say, I'm going back. And so I think that that's what happens. By the way, apropos of the numbers, there were 33,000 immigrants to Israel in 2019. More than 10,000 of them, almost 11,000 of them, were between the ages of 15 to 35. So you're talking about a third of people who make Aliyah are between the ages of 15 and 35. That's a very, very young immigration group. Okay, and that's part of the reason, perhaps, why even in our survey you're seeing they're not thinking about economics when you're 18.
Right. So, and then I want to go back to the parents for a second because you have a lot of questions regarding that. So, the parents and versus the Olim. So, what other differences do you see in the answers between the parents and the Olim?
I think one of the other, there were two related questions that related to parents understanding who their children spend time with. Okay, we were interested in knowing whether parents overseas knew where their child was. On weekends or Shabbat or on holidays, and whether they could name two of those families or two of those people.
Wow.
Why was that relevant? Because if something happens to your kid, even if it's something minor, okay?
And even if they're older.
There's somebody else that you can talk to and say, hey, listen, I think my child is going through X, Y, Z. I think they're not telling me the whole story. Can you help? Or I myself was this way. You don't want to turn to somebody else. You don't want to tell your parents who just saw you off in hysterics at the airport and say, listen, I think I might have made a mistake in my rental contract. I didn't have somebody read it, and now the security deposit is getting deposited and it's 5,000 shekel or whatever it is.
Right.
And so there's an embarrassment in talking to people about it. And this way, if parents know who their friends are in Israel and who their support group is, it's a whole lot better. And that's actually effectively what we've become for some of the people who've lived with us in the past.
Right.
You become that person who you talk to.
There's a Hebrew term, mishpacha metzed, which is adopted family. It sounds like a very weighty term. It's not. There's nothing official about it.
Right.
But it's a comfort for the Olim that they have somebody to turn to, somebody they can spend time with, someone they can ask questions and rely on the answers that they get, someone just more experienced.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the interesting data points on the subject of parents knowing, and this is where the data shows it's different, something like 23% of Olim strongly agreed that their parents know where they are, as opposed to 38% of parents. So parents think they know where their kids are.
But they don't.
I'm not suggesting that's a bad thing. I'm not even suggesting there's anything nefarious about it. I'm just saying they don't know, they think they know.
It's not a black and white issue, but it's much, the parents think they know a lot more. They're more sure of it, and the Olim are saying, nah.
I think there's a certain amount of what you can learn or understand from just living in a different country.
And we address that in the conclusions of the book. We say, listen, it's very hard for you to understand if you haven't moved here and made the adjustment to understand what people are going through here. So understand that from a parent's perspective, and don't judge us for the decisions we make. And we'll try very hard not to judge the decisions you make. It's such a small thing, but one of the small cultural differences that I had explaining to friends and family was when I talked about Moed Bet, which is it merely means the second time, but what it means for kids who go through Bagrut, the matriculation exam system, and even for university students, that you take one final exam, but you have a chance to take another one. So of course, your parents will say to you, why did your kids fail? No, you just get to do it again because you might get a little bit better, a bit higher grade. It's extremely common even amongst Israeli kids who take mathematics as one of them. That they take a Moed Bet to see that they could do better.
Right.
But go explain to a parent overseas, listen, I can't send my kid to you to visit, because they're taking the second exam for mathematics in the middle of July.
Right.
Okay. No, they didn't fail. They just want a little bit more points on their grade, but that's a cultural difference.
They may have failed.
They might have. It's a very. Those are difficult exams, but those are concepts that are not understood. Automatically, somebody from the outside will say, well, "Wait a minute, I don't understand. Why do?"
The state exams in New York, you would only redo again this
If you
summer
fail.
if you failed.
Okay.
That's why.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can't just do it to go from
I'm one of those that
from
failed.
from
That's
a
why
90
I
to
didn't
a
think
95.
about the other,
Yeah.
the other
Yeah.
side of things.
Yeah.
Okay, so our time is almost up, but maybe we should, the few minutes we have left, focus on giving practical tips for people who are either considering or who are going to be making Aliyah very soon.
Yeah.
That's a very broad question, but you could take it to any direction you want. And you could, whether it connected to your experiences or not.
Yeah.
So first would be stay married and don't separate. And
Yeah, keep on trying. But I think that's even whether you make Aliyah or not. No matter what, there are always difficulties. No matter where you live, there are difficulties. I think one of the best tips I can give both the parents and Olim, okay, and the families that they leave behind and the Olim that come here, try very, very hard not to compare your life here to the life there. Those comparisons are very difficult to continue to do.
can you
over the
not
course
do
of your life.
that? I don't know. I can't.
You have to try not to, I think,
Right.
because otherwise, if you're always comparing it to something else, you'll always find that the grass is greener somewhere else. Okay, you'll always find it.
Right.
I think we're very blessed that we have children who really don't look back, and we acknowledge them in the book. They never said it was better there, and they were 8 and 13 when we came. So I think that's.
And those are not easy ages.
No. There was a point in time where our 13-year-olds.
And we have brought them back to America
To visit.
regularly in the summers, but still we don't have that.
Yeah, they never said we'd rather be there.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I think it's impressive for them as people. I'm not sure I would take credit for it as a parent, but I think it's impressive for them as for who they are.
And would you, if you would live your life, would you make Aliyah at a younger age?
Yes. The answer to that is definitely yes. I think it's easier when you're younger. I think openly one of the mistakes I made from an employment perspective was I saw the Startup Nation train beginning to move along, okay, and I saw the ecosystem in Jerusalem begin to grow. And one of the mistakes that I made, because I was comfortable where I was, and because the children were little, and because he wasn't here, I didn't stop to retool. If I had it to do again, I would probably find a way to get into the tech ecosystem in a different way than I am now. But it was I could be self-critical about that move, but it's something that if I had to do it again, that's something I would rethink. It makes your life a little bit easier when you're involved at that level in the tech ecosystem and have been trained in it.
But from the children's perspective,
What would they?
would you like them
for
to be
sure.
younger?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, even though they both did extremely well, it's just easier.
How long did it take them to feel comfortable with Hebrew?
It took my son, I would say about a year.
Okay, he was
you know,
8.
He
so
was
yeah.
8. My daughter, because she did, youth movement and was very involved in the beginning, which is, an enormous part of their social system.
What youth
that's where
movement?
B'nai Akiva, and
Okay.
that's where.
That's under my house.
Yeah. Well, it
Yes.
used to be behind your house. Now it's right
I
under
still
your house.
hear it.
Yes. I hear it too.
I hear it. Okay,
They're quite loud. It's one of the largest sniffing there is.
The year that we were here in 06, 07, that pilot year, my daughter was in 5th grade, and she did a lot of the hard work then. Her Hebrew skills were as good as any other 10-year-old coming from a day school
and that's
education.
Not enough.
amazing.
But
Yeah.
but she did the hard work then,
Wow.
and it was so much a part of her
Okay.
that she was crying when she left Israel at the end of the year. She was dying to come back.
Really?
She could not
Amazing.
Yeah.
be
Wow.
really happy back in America.
I think the only other thing I would add as a tip for young families, for people who still have grandparents overseas, do the very best you can to include grandparents in the life of your Israeli children here. I recognize it's hard. It's even very hard, because once your children get older and have a life of their own, a schedule of their own, it's extremely difficult. Do the best you can to keep grandparents alive, remotely in the house. They're going to be grandparents overseas. That includes my parents, who are not great technologically. But so long as you keep those stories alive with your own children, I think it will at least ensure some connection between them and their grandparents who live overseas. And I think that that's something that will help. It will help connect them in a way that is not so easy to do with distance.
Okay.
And
Final words?
And for the young Olim who are coming, especially the ones who might be coming as a lone soldier, to have the parents and the Olim have the long view, the long view of making it through their army service, of making it through the university life, that you can patiently see the way through, and the integration that will take place after all those years, and the success that we hope that can be seen in Israel. We've seen it for some of our earliest lone soldiers that worked with us, that lived with us. So,
And they should also know.
Our first one got married a couple of months ago.
Wow, they
Graduate.
should also know it's difficult.
It is.
And they don't
Yes.
and they don't know it according to this.
They don't
so-
know. They don't know it, and they,
Yeah.
we'd recommend that both parents and young Olim in particular sit and talk about all those things.
Right. Okay, so Avi Lusik and Ariella Bernstein, thank you very
Nemo,
much.
toda
And you
raba.
could look up online.
Yes, it'll
very
be on
soon.
Amazon. The book will be on Amazon on March 15th.
Okay, Aliyah, Home, Hope, and Reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Siga.
you.
Thank you.
And we'll have to come for Shabbat dinner or
Nachon.
something.
We do.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much. Thank you so much for your
And
time.
thanks to
Thanks
Nefesh
Nefesh
B'Nefesh.
B'Nefesh for their time.